Hello, we are going to share on this Sunday's Gospel. That is the third Sunday of Easter. And April 23, third Sunday of Easter. And the main point is that Jesus has truly risen, appearing to two disciples who were on their way to Emmaus. On the first day of the week, two disciples were going to a village called Emmaus. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and walked with them. He appeared, he came near and walked with them, but they did not recognize him. So, and he said to them, "What are you discussing?" And Jesus asked them, "What are you discussing?" And they stood still, looking sad, and the one called Cleopas asked him, "Are you the only stranger who does not know the things that have taken place these days?" So then Jesus asked them, "What things? What things?" And they said, "Things about Jesus of Nazareth." They did not recognize him yet, huh? So Jesus asked, "What things?" And they said, "Things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death, and they crucified him." So here they were talking about this, but they said, "Why do you not know about this?" And then Jesus explained something to them. And then, beginning from Moses and the prophets, Jesus interpreted to them what referred to him in the scripture. So Jesus explained these things to them, so that hoping they would understand what had happened. And as they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. He pretended that he was going to continue, but they would be stopping at this place. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening." And so Jesus went in to stay with them that night. Okay. So during dinner and during supper, Jesus was at the table with them, and he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then at this point, their eyes were opened, they recognized Jesus, the risen Christ, who died on the cross but has risen from the dead. But as soon as they recognized him, he disappeared. Jesus disappeared. And they did not, and he vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" So their hearts were burning when they were listening to Jesus and his explanation. but they didn't say anything at that time. But now they recall and spoke between themselves. And so Jesus is risen, and he appeared to the two disciples, and they recognized him here. And so they set out at once and returned to Jerusalem. They were not going to Emmaus again. They're going back to Jerusalem. And when they arrived in Jerusalem, they found gathered together the 11. The 11 would be what we call the apostles. Now we will call them apostles. And they were gathered together, and those with them who were saying, "The Lord has truly been raised and has appeared to Simon." In fact, they mentioned this thing first, but Simon was not the first one to see the risen Christ. But he was the leader of the group, and so they used his name and said that that Jesus appeared to Simon also. So Simon was a witness to the risen Christ. And the two of them were also witnesses, and they talked about what took place on their way to Emmaus and how Jesus was made known to them in the breaking of bread. So they also shared. And so altogether different people are witnesses of Christ rising from the dead. And in rising from the dead, he would break through death and sin. Now we wish to add another thing, because on April 22nd would be World Earth Day, a very important day, World Earth Day. And what I'm saying now in English would be from the Vatican news. But the Vatican news is at present, what we got was only on the Chinese side, so Chinese news. And so here we should not put this so high. May your will be done on earth, with accord from World Earth Day. I'll explain this later on. And the World Earth Day increasingly not only use words, but also now go to action. And it increasingly responds to work, development, health, food, and altogether survival of the planet. The planet might not survive if we continue like we are now. And the planet not surviving, the inhabitants of the planet would not survive also. So it's very important to care for the earth, to care for the earth. So here we talk about the Chinese, colloquial Chinese Lord's Prayer, and 願你的旨成行於地 in the colonial Cantonese version, here we should have earth, your will be done on earth as in heaven. But the colloquial Chinese version say among humans. Among humans is narrowing narrowing the sphere, and we must change it back to earth. Your will be done on earth. 你的天父的旨意成行於地。And so it would go with the World Earth Day better. And the World Earth Day would accord with the Lord's Prayer. So it's World Earth Day. And the World Earth Day. And it is, and now the Vatican News talked about the World Earth Day. This year's World Earth Day would include work, development, health, food, and the planet, and all the inhabitants, the survival of the planet and the inhabitants is closely connected. So the World Earth Day is very important. And so here we already spoke about the Lord's Prayer using earth. Your will be done on earth, and so that it will go with World Earth Day, and would see that the World Earth Day should accord with God's will. So this is the Vatican News line. And say April 22nd, a yearly World Earth Day, yearly. And this year is the 53rd year. And United Nations, a very important environmental protection with 193 member states and a few billion inhabitants, or a few billion people would participate. And this year the Vatican News said we must notice, not more observe the environmental themes, which should include work, development, health, food, and the earth, and the inhabitants, the survival of the earth and the environment, and the inhabitants. It's very important, because if we don't do something about the situation, the earth will not survive, and we will not survive also. So so we have talked about this just now, and we want to conclude with talking about the colloquial Chinese Lord's Prayer, in which they we speak about thy God's will be done on earth as in heaven, has been changed to God's will be done among humans. We cannot talk only about humans. We have to talk about the whole environment, the whole earth, the whole creation. So we need to change it back to, we need to change the colloquial Lord's Prayer back into your will be done on earth. Among humans, we must change it back to earth. And that would include all that we just mentioned and more. So Christ has risen, and we must also go forward and have a more correct colloquial Chinese Lord's Prayer. Okay.